sometimes I might be too glib about the ease in which one can develop and go into the first jhana, without also mentioning that in the process of learning how to do the first jhana, there are a lot of experiences along the way of bringing the jhana factors together so that they're all together at the same time. But when you begin to gather the jhana factors, you begin to have insights and experiences when you have, let us say, a new view about how to look at things, which is the view from the Dhamma. You see, a lot of people will practice meditation without the view of the Dhamma, and therefore they practice meditation in order to get something out of it.
Yeah.
Later. Practice now, get paid later. And that the Buddha was very clear upon that, because a lot of people were coming in the time of the Buddha that were doing basically, the issue is self-flagellation, or what is called austerity, or in the Pali the word is tudanga. And that this is what the Buddha practiced, and he was better at it than everybody else, to the point that he nearly killed himself. I imagine that people in the time of the Buddha did kill themselves by practicing austerities that were not even as severe as his, that he was really up there with trying to prove to himself that this system of Tudanga either works or it doesn't work. And so what happened then is that after he figured out that it's the middle path, the easy way, to not try to get this and not try to tear up that, but just to leave everything kind of on its own. And yet the mentality of doing something in order to get some benefit out of it later is deeply buried into the laws of karma and the whole reason or rationale behind them doing the austerities, with the idea that these guys, by the way, were generally ascetics, and their behavior, or sila, at the ordinary level was excellent. All right, these were not preachers who were trying to get money from their congregation. These are guys that are really out there practicing. But the idea of doing the austerities in is so that we can burn off old bad karma. As if, in the past there was good action and bad action. Now we're practicing good action, but we also want to burn off all the old bad karma, so that then we can get purified faster and go off into Nibbana, or whatever the reference was. And the Buddha pointed out that, first off, these people who were practicing this, they're not even sure that they were bad in the past. How can you be sure that you were so bad in the past that you're doing this? And how can you be so sure that you even had a past that could be so bad that you're torturing yourself to burn off all of that karma? But then looking at it from the position of, know what you're doing right now, which is the austerities, in an application, for instance, starving oneself, or going without sleep, or having one's arm in the air, or standing. There's a whole, there's so many different austerities. Sitting for long periods of time, sitting up all night, and not laying down is one of the austerities. And so the Buddha tried to get people out of that. But yet there were some austerities that he did allow within the frame of reference is, why are you doing this? What value are you getting out of it? Not what value will you soon get out of it, but what value are you getting out of it right now? And so that leads to a good example of the monks in that time, and still here in Thailand, when they're out on Bendabat, they go barefoot. And it's actually for me a really good advantage now, because I only wear shoes about an hour or two a month.
Oh, sounds beautiful.
And all the time is barefoot. But that was part of the training. And the training was on austerity while I was doing that. But while I knew that I was out there walking on cobblestones and gravel and that kind of thing, that I was also toughening up the feet and to not feeling like that I was in jeopardy. Well, people who don't wear shoes their whole life, they've got no problem. It's only us who would have worn shoes our whole lives and then take them off that we have to get the feet toughened up. Right? So with all of the practice of toughening up the feet, I actually don't do a whole lot of long walks. That if I was actually going out on a walk, I'd probably put on shoes anyway. So the point is that there is benefit in being able to go shoeless. And it gets you in touch with the ground. You can feel things. There's a whole lot of benefit for going shoeless, but taking one's shoes off for the first time and going without shoes, going barefoot as a training is tough going.
Yeah.
It's hard to do, but it's worthwhile. Okay, so this is one of the examples then of an austerity that's worthwhile doing. But what that really is getting at then is, this is actually down to the point of meditation, is that we have to get to the point of not wanting anything more than what we've got right now, because this is satisfactory. This is what we're actually developing, is the skill of being satisfied right now rather than building up credit.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
All right. And so the benefit would be, for instance, if you're washing dishes, then the benefit is not only do you get the dishes washed, but you can be mindful and you don't mind it, that you actually enjoy washing the dishes.
I clean dishes for work, so I clean dishes like sometimes 25 hours a week, 50 hours a fortnight, and this is a perspective I have been taking on more
I
and
was
more.
wondering where this image of commercial dishwashing came from. I didn't know that you could do mind reading through Skype. That happens so many times. And I normally say it's serendipity, but that time I caught it.
Yeah.
I caught that flash of a visual image of commercial dishwashers. And so I use that as an example. So whatever you're doing, you can enjoy it.
Yeah. I find that sometimes, though, people get pissed off with it. It's like, I come into work, I'm there for 6 hours, I've got a big smile on my face the whole time cleaning dishes, and the boss will come in, just give me this blank stare. Why the hell are you smiling? Why are you enjoying this? This is horrible. Yeah.
Well, that puts you kind of into the okay corral.
Yeah.
In the sense that any task that has to be done, we choose to either do it or not do it. And part of the practice of the Dhamma is learning with discernment, for sure, what jobs are worthy of being done and which ones are not, so that we come down to having a really easy life, because we don't do much, because nothing that much we care about that much. But when you're getting started, when you're occupied in the sense of occupation, then the really important thing is for this meditation student, if I can call him that, um, his real job is just to start to enjoy what he's choosing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it looks like this. It's kind of, four squares or an OK corral. And here's how it works: is that you can say how you feel about what you do. So whether you do it or not is either left or right. But how you feel about it, I don't like it and I'm down, or I do like it and I'm up, then
Mm-hmm.
forms a corral or a
Yeah,
four
yeah.
post. Okay, so here's the question: is this actually is reference to Ari Burns' "Okay Corral"? I'm okay, you're okay. And in this case, the "you" is the work we're doing. So many people will do work, but they still feel victim. And so it's like they have to do it. And so they do it, but the work is okay, but I'm not okay because I've got to do it. And that also works with people having an authority figure or a boss, that I'm not okay, but the boss is okay. He's bigger and better than I am, and I feel bad and lonely, and I need help, and I'll do that with a religion and try to get them to get me out of my own mess. Okay, so that's when we have that "I'm not okay, you're okay" attitude. It's really, really dangerous to have an "I'm not okay and you're not okay" attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And I really hate not only this job and what it's doing, and I don't believe in it, but that I'm not even doing a good job of it, and I hate it. And so you can see how people will spiral down. And so they think then that in order to feel better, I've got to quit the job.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's the only way out. But the other option, which is the one that you're working on and choosing to do,
Mm-hmm.
is the I can do the job, the job's okay, and I'm okay
Mm-hmm.
doing the job. And so that puts you in that top left quadrant of the OK Corral. And what you can then do with that is expand it to the whole, not the whole world in a really big sense, but to your environment in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And in a way, you can think of that this is actually nothing more than growing up to be a man that is a very high quality, noble human being.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what the goal of the Buddha is to wake up to what is a high quality life.
Mm-hmm.
Is Western Buddhism, but there's a lot of magical thinking in Asia also, that this thing enlightened is way out of proportion, or that people become sanctified or magical beings,
Mm-hmm.
rather than, oh no, it's just someone who is in tune with his environment.
Yeah. Okay. I
And
haven't
so,
heard it said like that before. Mm-hmm.
yes, and that in tune can also be seen as atonement. And then we have at one-ment, so that we're at one with everything. And now within the concept of the Buddha, he breaks all of that down into exactly all of the components that bring that up, including our conceit and our fears and the woeful states that we get ourselves into. But the important thing for the practice is to recognize those states, not necessarily when we're in them, but when we're about to go into them, so that we can keep out. We can stay out of the woeful states. And that one of the woeful states would then be the state of anxiety or being angry, competitive with someone. This is referenced in the sense of the hell state. And then wanting something that we can't have or we can't get enough of is the ghostly world that they talk about, the hungry ghost. And then the animal world, the animal world is really interesting because so many people are in it so much of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that is living a life the way that an animal would. We can think of that in two ways. One is that means that people are living instinctually because they're living their lives using the part of the brain that animals use, and they're not using the part of the brain that is the human part of the brain, this frontal cortex up here.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that's one way of looking at it. But the other way, which is kind of more practical, is to recognize that as children in our society, we're raised to do things to please the parents, to please big people, because we're already in the position of victim. And so we go along to get along. We do what we're told to do, or often we rebel and then resent doing what we are told to do. And then that will lead possibly to guilt and other problems. But we have this relationship with this system that is basically what we're told to do. And we hear that from our parents, we hear that from teachers, we hear that from preachers, we hear that from adults, we hear it from other kids at school. And we bring this big mix-mash of all of these various views and rules that we've gotten from society into, and then almost solidify that as an ego state that's called the superego by Freud, or Ari Byrne calls it the parent ego state. And the Buddha calls it attachments to rites, rules, and rituals, which is all coming out of the past, and it's kind of a hodgepodge. But for the most part, it keeps you out of trouble, but it doesn't get you satisfied. It only does half the job.
Clears things up quite a bit. It's good.
And so that's what would be called normal right view, as opposed to chaos, which is doing things that we're told to do and resent the hell out of it, and then rebel against it. That then goes against these rules, and that's wrong view. So you have wrong view, ordinary right view, and then supramundane right view, which is the actual noble right view. That's the first item on the actual full eightfold noble path. And that is right view. And that the right view that we're looking at is, number one, the main job we have is to investigate and to stay in the present where we can investigate. That all of that of getting caught in the rites, rules, and rituals is a major form of suffering. Now, Ari Byrne would say that what's going on there is a dialogue between the parent and the child, and the parent is saying, "You do this," and the child is saying, "Oh, okay, I'll do it, but I don't want to." Or the parent is saying, "You do this," and the child will say, "Okay, I'll do it, but I don't want to." All right, and so that's the main relationship that we have on the inside. So here now, your parent ego state is saying, you got to go wash dishes. And then the child is there saying, oh, no, I don't want to. All right? But if we can change the child's attitude about it, using the frontal cortex or using the wise part of the brain, we can recognize, oh, no, there is no reason for us to feel bad just because we're in the habit of feeling bad.
Mm-hmm.
That we can, in fact, choose to feel the way that we want to feel. And that's marvelous because nobody ever thought that before. Most people think that they're a slave to their feelings.
Mm.
And they are when they live in the reptilian brain. And so this is what they mean by being born again as an animal. So imagine the donkey just carrying around a huge log on his back. And that log is like, 4 inches round, and it's then connected to the center of a millstone. And the donkey is going around and around and around this 30-foot circle or so, carrying this millstone while while the man who's operating the thing is shoving sugar cane husk and all into this thing, and then the outcome is sugarcane juice. The donkey never gets any sugarcane juice.
Mm.
And that's how most people live their whole lives. They live their lives in this animal state of doing what they're told to do, not questioning it, not making an investigation, figuring out what value is there in doing what I'm doing. Nor do they wake up to the fact that, hey, you can do what you've got to do, but you can feel good about it. and then you can do a bit of planning and a bit of getting things going so that you have less and less to do. And then you have an easy life, unbound, unburdened. And you can
Sounds
live a
good.
very, very high quality, noble life.
Mm.
So this is what following the Eightfold Noble Path is all about. This is the Dhamma. And this is the reason that we practice this thing that's, I use the word meditation because it's a common word known in English, but the actual word is not what we're doing in the Pali. There's no word for meditation in Pali.
Mm.
Let me think about that. Mulling something over is normally meditation or thinking about a topic or whatever. They do it in a systematic way in prayers or in thinking about the glory of God or something like that. And that kind of thing does have an enormous amount of value. But Sita Bhavana is actually the word that is used. And just an easier way to say it is anapanasati, because anapanasati is the Sita Bhavana that we're practicing. And Sita Bhavana, the word Sita, or some people say chit, for instance, in the mostly in Sanskrit, Sat Chit Anand, you can hear the chit in there. Okay. This is the part of the mind that is not normally when we use the word mind. We think of the mind then as mostly either a whole bunch of stuff or primarily the frontal cortex in the sense of this is what can think and see and experience. As opposed to the word chit actually is more of the reptilian mind or the part of the mind that is instinctual or the part of the mind that is associated with feelings, especially bad feelings, the feelings of loss, the feelings of sorrow, the feelings of anger, the kind of feelings that we don't normally need but we experience them anyway, far too often. It's kind of like a relic of the past.
Mm.
And we start off in that state a lot as children. Children are extraordinarily emotional. And that the part of the growing up process is getting out of the emotions, and most people just hide them.
Yeah.
Without developing beyond that state. And so this is basically what we're doing, is we're developing this part of the mind. That the word bhavana is in Thai is bhawan. And it actually just means to develop. We can think of it as training or skill development, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is what really meditation is about. It's to develop the mind. But the part that we're developing is the part of the mind that needs the training, just like here's an actual interesting example, and that is the word Nibbana has two qualities to it, but both of them have to do with the quality of cooling off. One way of using it is that after you take food off of a fire, it cannot be eaten immediately. It's got to cool off. You've probably done that. You've had a hot piece of bread out of the oven. They serve it to you, and you take a bite, and all of a sudden, your whole roof of your mouth is now.
All too often. I don't think I'll ever learn not to eat things straight out of the microwave. It's been happening my whole life. I'm horrible at it. Grabbing
All
bowls out
right.
of the microwave that are boiling hot, burn myself.
Yes.
I've got.
Okay.
I work in
Well,
a kitchen. I've got 3, 4, 5 burns on my hand just from that one thing.
all right. Now you can also recognize that the mind itself gets sometimes boiling hot,
Yeah.
and many times it's just a little bit too hot, and it would be better if it were cooled off. All right. Here's the other way or usage of the word Nibbana, and that is in the sense of domesticating animals. An example would be training a dog.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Basically, the basic training that a dog needs can be had from another dog who's had the training. So if you've got a second dog you bring into the house, that second dog is really easy to train because he's already watching what the other dog is doing.
Yeah.
All right. But the whole quality of dog training or even domesticating animals in whatever format, the whole quality of domesticating an animal is to nibbana the animal, to train it, to domesticate it,
Gotta
to
domesticate the mind.
bring it into service, so that it is a part of the family. And as opposed to a draft animal like this donkey that I was talking about, that never gets any benefit out of doing the same drudgery all day long, every day. That's all he does is walk in that 30-foot circle. The whole point of him doing that is sugarcane juice, and he never gets any sugarcane juice.
Mm.
And so that's the way that we live our lives oftentimes. We're promised when you're in school, first grade, okay, if you finish first grade, then you can go to second grade. Isn't that wonderful? Yay! And they're setting you up. And then by the end of the fourth grade, oh, now you're out of primary school into middle school. Now you're a big kid, and everybody feels proud of it and all of that. They're being used. And some kids know it and they resent it.
Yeah.
But they don't know how to get out of it. Very few of them actually, and this is actually part of the job of a good teacher, is to get the child at least to enjoy what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very rare though.
Because if the kid doesn't enjoy what he's doing, then school's going to be a drudgery for year after year after year after year.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not going to get the real benefit out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the story goes, okay, so now he's high school finished, and then he goes to university and maybe a graduate degree, and now he's got a good job, and now he gets a house, and he gets a wife, and he gets his family, and he's 40 years old, and he says, what the hell? And so then he gets a Harley Davidson.
One night, sitting alone in a car park, crying to himself, decides to buy a Harley.
Because his whole life has now, up to the age of 40, been lived unfulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was believing all the promises that he was making up or was told directly by other people who were making up these promises, that if you do this, that, and the other thing, then there will be a reward for you on the other side. But normally the reward is monetary rather than the real juice. But the Buddha talks about the term we use is the 4 requisites. And I generally refer to that as a bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
Your bottom line. So what you need to do is to decide through your own inspection what is your own bottom line, and that needs to be reviewed on a fairly regular basis so that you can figure out what is your bottom line, and then you start going towards living your life on that bottom line. So what are the 4 requisites? Just enough food, just enough housing, just enough clothing, and just enough medication.
Mm-hmm.
Adequate clothing, adequate housing. And so that begins to lower our bar so that we're able to, or some folks are able to go out and live in the woods, live free. They don't need much of anything. So by living free in that regard, then that means that we're encumbered with all of the duties of life that our society wants us to do. That they go rah-rah, sis, boom, bob about gross national product and wealth and unemployment, wanting that to get very, very low, 3-4%, those kinds of things. That's all in the service of big business that has you as the donkey going around this treadmill called washing dishes, and that you're not getting the actual benefit out of washing the dishes. So washing the dishes is not contributing to your happy life, that you actually have to build your happy life on top of what most people would think would not be an easy job.
Mm-hmm.
And so that gives you now the possibility, I can plan for, instead of getting to be the boss of the guy who does the dishes and climb in that way, we can think of getting out of the society altogether.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the ultimate goal, is that if you've really got everything together, if you've got the mind unified, if you've got the mind in that state of jhana, that first jhana, so that you've got the jhana factors there, then that's basically all we need.
Mm-hmm.
And that we can maintain that so long as we can stay above our own bottom line.
And not right now.
Oh,
Hello.
I remember.
Do you want to come say hello then?
Hi, Jacob.
Hey Ash, do you want to come say hello?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi.
Hello. I live in Thailand.
Who's that?
Well, I remember you.
Hi. Hi.
Hi, I remember you.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Going good. How are you?
I'm doing fine.
That's good.
What you doing
Got your
now?
friend over.
Okay. All right.
See you.
See ya. Can you close the door,
Okay,
please?
bye-bye.
Thank you.
So the funny part about this thing, about the practice of the Dhamma,
Mm-hmm.
is that it's good in the beginning, it's good in the middle, and it's good in the end because it's all the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that many students, when they begin to practice, it's not good for them because they're expecting some value out of it.
Yeah.
So the very beginning of the practice has to be done with the point of getting value out of the practice right from the beginning, right from the get-go, and that as we gather the skills that we need, then, for instance, the skill of satisfaction. Satisfaction is actually a skill to be developed,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't learn how to be satisfied by being dissatisfied. We learn to be satisfied by practicing being satisfied. And so as we begin practicing in our satisfaction in the skill grows, that means that over time, our satisfaction grows very deep, very satisfying. So this is the way that we practice. And washing dishes is a really excellent time and place to practice.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Satisfaction, to really like what you're doing.
Yeah.
And you have to remember it. But you got one dish at a time, and you can remember every dish or whatever. And so this is the way to practice. And that's the way that we start in the beginning. So with correct practice, we're getting the benefit right from the very beginning. But as we begin to open up and see what's going on, we then recognize that, oh, I understand now what suffering is. And I'm now going to take on the extra added job of avoiding suffering. And a way to do that, or kind of the way of thinking about that is to begin to have only wholesome thoughts, as opposed to, or instead of entertaining unwholesome thoughts, we recognize them as soon as we can and change the thoughts from unwholesome thoughts into wholesome thoughts. And this is still work, but this right effort.
Yeah.
And eventually we get into the habit of only having good, wholesome thoughts.
Sounds difficult.
Well, there's it's a skill to be developed.
It's a skill to be developed, yeah.
And it's worthwhile developing. In a way of like going barefoot. We can think of it that we have been living our lives kind of in a shoe to protect us, and that learning how to come out of our shell, out of our protection, and learn to live openly is actually quite a skill that needs to time to develop, because we have been hiding from the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune for a long time because we've been a victim. Once we get to the point of saying, hey, it doesn't matter what slings and arrows are thrown at me, I can dodge them, I can twist around, I can I can let it bounce off, or I can heal. I'll get over it. And so we then open up in that way. And it's the same kind of training as learning to go barefoot. And it has also the same value. Here's one thing that I didn't mention before, and that is that when you're practicing going barefoot, in reality, one of the qualities is you begin to plan in advance where you're going.
Okay.
In the short way, in the sense of in the next 20 steps or so, just immediately ahead. In other words, is there a mud puddle there that I'm going to walk around, or is there the shade of a tree? I can walk in the shade of the tree rather than on the hot pavement. There are many different things to look at, as well as making sure that there are many things that you don't actually step on. All right. So let's use that as a metaphor for how to live one's own full life, which is only having wholesome thoughts in the mind is very much like looking at where we're going in the next 10 or 20 steps, the next move or two of the mind, and make sure that we don't step on anything that is going to bring up feeling. Feelings of competitiveness, feelings of anxiety, feelings of fear, feelings of not feeling good enough, all of that kind of stuff. Feelings of this is not good enough. That's all dukkha. So in that middle phrase, we actually get really on to alert for that. And so the metaphor of going barefoot is basically what we're talking about. You've probably heard the expression, ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free.
Yes. Okay,
it's a quote from Jesus. But there's a third line to it, which is actually the important line. It's Murphy's Law. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free, but first it'll piss you off.
Verbatim.
All right. So it will piss us off. And so this is the process then of beginning to go barefoot, or beginning to really watch where we're stepping, every step. Because before we just plowed on by without really looking at where we were going, because we had the shoes of ignorance as a protection. But now we're changing our attitude about things in the sense of, well, I'm going to watch where I'm going because I'm going to stay out of suffering. And so that's why it's good in the middle, is because it keeps you out of suffering. This is when you're actually in the stream. This is the work of the stream enterer. The one who is in the stream, what is he in the stream of? The stream of having wholesome thoughts. The stream of keeping out of unwholesome thoughts. And then it's good in the end when we're capable of maintaining these wholesome thoughts easily, so that there's no more work to it. And that's really good in the end, when it's easy. But it takes the training, it takes the skills. Just like some pool shots are spectacular to some people, but to the pool sharks, they're easy because they're well practiced.
So how do is it more about developing the mindset of having only wholesome thoughts rather than having an aversion to unwholesome thoughts? So like when an unwholesome thought arises, I don't want to have this knee-jerk reaction towards it, do I?
No, in fact, the right way to handle that, but first it'll piss you off. That's what happened, okay? I don't like what I see in my mind. And that is what we have to train out of. And it happens right from the very beginning, right from the first time the students will sit down. Let's say that the first time the student goes to a Goenka retreat. And about the first thing he hears is, when the mind wanders away from the breath, never mind, start again. Goenka has never mind.
Straight up, this actually, like, they had a very similar one of the Uberkin one, and it pissed me off that I heard it so many times. It really did.
Well, this is exactly what we're talking about,
Yeah.
is that never mind that this brand new realization that in this case the mind has wandered away from the breath, or in the statement to where we're talking about it now, whenever we recognize the mind is in an unwholesome state or about to be in one. And many people will have the reaction of imagine that you're